Okay, so welcome everyone to this inspirational speech. This inspirational speech is part of an event which we have dedicated expressly to our EPALE ambassadors, but we have decided that it was be great also to share this moment also with our EPALE community. That's why we are here. So I just remind both the ambassadors who are present in our, in our private meeting, let's say, to write in the chat if they have comments, and to the ones who are watching on EPALE to post comments in the comment section. So here we are with Alek Tarkowski. Just making a very quick introduction. Alek is the strategy director at the Open Future Foundation, which is an European think tank for the open movement. He's a sociologist, activist, and strategist, and he has been working since 2004, both in Poland, where he's based, both globally, in organizations and social movements, building an open internet. So my first question for you, Alek. You have worked on the broad topic of open knowledge, investigating digital strategies, also commons. How do education learning skills come into this picture? And also on a personal level, how have you worked on education in your path?
First of all, thank you very much for this invitation. I am very happy to be here. I will start by saying that, as you heard from Sarah's introduction, I'm not your typical educator. I once in a while played the role of an academic teacher, but I do that rarely. So the question I think I wanted to start with is show you what's my educational path, because by the way, I believe you don't need to be a formal teacher to be an educator. And I think we are all educating each other. And I started thinking what's a very early experience for me that we could describe as educational. And I realized that really long ago, somewhere around student times, so this was for me at the turn of the century, with my friend, decided that it would be exciting to teach our friends about the Firefox browser. And this might sound maybe funny, maybe not, but we really were excited by it. We thought it offered new opportunities. We also understood it's open. You know, it was a piece of software that was very different from the dominant then browser produced by Microsoft. And we organized a small meeting in a house. You know how people organize meetings, I don't know, to sell pots, for instance, or now people sell the cooking machine. I don't remember what it's called. We organized one not to sell, but to convince people to use better software. And this was for me, I now realize a very typical thing what I try to do, because I care a lot about education. Another experience I wanted to share with you is one when I worked for several years as a strategic advisor in the Polish Prime Minister's office. And we were writing a digital strategy, a long-term strategy, a mid-term strategy, and I was responsible for the digital strategy. And this was, again, over 10 years ago, so not that long ago. And what became very clear is that including broadly understood skills in a digital strategy is not obvious. The obvious parts were infrastructure and support for services, business, economy. And that everyone understood. And then this whole idea that the really important part, not some addition, but the core part has to be, you can call it training, you can call it skills, you can call it competences. At that time, at least in Poland, of course, it wasn't a new idea, but it was an idea that needed to be thought for and was not obvious. And I must say, I think these two experiences continue. So I still feel there's a lot of space where we all need to be educating each other. And I still feel, and I do a lot of work on strategies, on policies, that we still need to explain and secure the role of education. Because of course there are digital skills strategies, but I often feel people just want to push them into their little own box of education. Everyone will of course say, yes, education is important. But I actually think it's fundamental for thinking about digital.
Thank you, Alek. That was great also to get a little bit to know also your path, and also how you deal with education in so very different ways. And just getting a little bit more on the education part, I just want to tell that while we were deciding the title for your speech, we were at a certain point we arrived to this title, very similar to what we have. So open education, a game changer for adult learning. And I proposed you to put the question mark in the end, while you said, okay, why don't we remove it? Which I really liked, because I really like that, because of course we think that questions are productive and good, but sometimes it's also good to have statements. So I like that we start from these statements, and I want to go a bit deeper on that. So why do you think that open education can be a game changer? Of course, especially when dealing with adult learning.
And I must admit, since we're having an honest conversation, that once we started thinking about it, I thought, okay, am I really willing to put a dot there and finish that sentence? I think I am. But I must admit. So maybe I should start by saying I've been working on this idea of open education for a long time. This is for me part of my work with Creative Commons, a movement which has been for me foundational, again, speaking about personal stories. I have been a Creative Commons ambassador for over 15 years. Before I had a job, to be honest, as a volunteer, I was doing Creative Commons Poland. And after a while, I focused on education. Why do I think it's? I think it's very important, but I think it's also very interesting that the idea of open education is changing. And this has been very visible in this Mentimeter, which was great, because several years ago, we would say, what does open education mean? Basically, open resources. That was actually the very big program that happened in Poland, that the government created open textbooks that are available online. But throughout years, I think it became clear that this is not enough. I'm very happy that the key words in the conversation were freedom and inclusion, because I think in the end, open education is a certain vision of values. That's one thing that's very important. And the other thing we learned is that in the end, what's most important for open education is not resources, but people. Before I started Open Future, I was leading a Polish organization called Centrum Cyfrowe, the digital center, which had and still has a very big open education program, which focuses on co-creation of resources for by teachers. So yes, there is the resource part, but we have this understanding that before we get the resources, we need to have teachers or educators who understand such ideas as sharing, as creating. They need to feel comfortable being creators and cooperating with each other. So this is, again, a certain path that's happening. And this is ultimately what I think is important in open education, because I still believe, again, this idea of digital education often gets very, I would say, technical, as in a lot of conversations about the internet, it gets very technology deterministic. We say, okay, maybe we can use a new piece of software or a new service or a new technology, I don't know, 3D printers or robots, and education will change. And I think that's not the right way to do it. The right way is to come up with bold ideas and visions for using this technology. And this is what I think open education does.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that, the idea that the educator is at the center, and also his or her change of mind and changes can happen there is also central for our platform, for what we advocate for. And also now I'd like to move a little bit, and I mean to broaden again a bit the topic, because I've read in the Open Future website, there is a very interesting article. I will share then later on the link also here, which is called the paradox of open, that you co-authored with your colleague Paul Keller, where you argue that in today's digital environment, openness serves both as a challenger to concentration of power, but also it can be its enabler. So can you maybe explain a little bit what this paradox about, and maybe also offer some ideas on how to solve it?
So the challenging of power part is the original idea about open, right? And I think it can very well be explained with education or academic publishing. These ideas about open, such as Creative Commons, were developed sort of in as an alternative to publishing models. And this is probably a story you know very well, that were based on this idea of strong control of resources for commercial purposes. This is a model that says you need to control your copyright, you need to control your intellectual property, you need to control what people do with it, because that's the way you make money. And this open education is an idea that an alternative is possible, where basically these resources are open and are still sustainable, are still useful, are still high quality. And by the way, this openness can work with commercial models. This is well visible in academic publishing, where the biggest publishers offer now open access to articles. But the really strong ideas go beyond the commercial model. So for instance, when, again, I think the academic example is maybe most useful, where you start thinking that libraries are very important. And actually a library, which is a public institution, which is not based on selling, but on sharing, can play the same role. And I think this has been this original idea, but what happened over time is we started looking at what happens to open resources. And this is again an educational story, which you maybe know, that a lot of open educational resources are now taken and put as just a part of big platforms or online educational services, where the free resources are just one part, but there are other parts which are slowly becoming more important, such as these educational services. Maybe these are tests, maybe these are some applications for learning. So the open layer is still there, but it becomes closed in this new service. And there's very interesting analysis done by an American organization called Spark, which shows that the big commercial publishers are a lot better in creating these services than the open education community is, and they show some kind of a gap that we need to fill. This is just one example from the world of education, but I think we all experience this sense that many open resources are being used by big corporations without giving back. For instance, very interesting conversations happen around Wikimedia. And Sarah, I know we share a connection with Wikimedia. I hope we talk about it a bit more. It's a very interesting development. You know that at some point Wikimedia realized that its biggest user basically is Google. A company that basically takes all Wikimedia content. And as you know, when you ask Google something, very often the response is content from Wikimedia. Is that good? Is that bad? Hard to say. It's certainly something new and certainly changes sort of the way we should be thinking about open. And maybe here I should highlight a report that I'm very happy that I learned about by an organization which I know is connected with you, which is the EAEA. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Is it EAEA? That's how I say it. And they just published a report called Digitalization and Democracy Context Paper. And I'm very, very happy. It's a very fascinating report, which again starts from this idea of adult education and really asks all these questions about power and democracy, which I think are very important today. Because this is probably a point I want to make that I hope will stick with you. I think today, being an ambassador of education, a lot is still about education, pedagogies, resources. But slowly we need to understand that there are, let's call them political maybe issues. There are questions about democracy that we can address in the education community. I stopped hearing.
Sorry. I had problems with my unmuting. Sorry. Oh, thanks, Alek, also to put all this complexity in the picture, because I think we need it also, you know, to broaden our reflection and to think really as how things are. Of course, you mentioned the EAA, which is the European Association for the Education of Adults, which is part also of our editorial board. We are happy to that we know that you're also connected and you participated also in their events. And we also have a comment from our participants that so I would like to bring in Claudia, my colleague, who's just taking care of looking at the comments.
Yes, Sarah, thank you. Hi, Alek. Yes,
Hello.
We have a nice comment from the ambassadors from Slavomir in this case, and I would like to share with you. The modern marketing and education have a lot in common, a lot of common ideas. Both are about engaging people to learn something and somehow change their lives. Mm-hmm. So I think it was nice to share with you, and you can discuss about this.
Maybe this is a good moment in responding to introduce an idea we also, Sarah, discussed, which again is a bit complex, but I think that's part of the challenge today. I know, and maybe that's what I want to say first, responding to you when you said the word complexity. This is what I deal a lot with. Yeah. I know there's approach to discussing digital education that tries to keep it very practical. I've been to events where the topic was let's understand digital education, and the most popular sessions were what's the best mobile app I can use to educate. And these are important things, right? This is about accessibility that was mentioned in the Mentimeter, usability, responding to needs. But that's sort of, I think this returns throughout my work that for good or bad, there are these complex systems that shape education, technological systems, legal systems like copyright. It's a very big challenge. I've been working for instance, a lot on copyright education, but today we also have, I don't know, education on artificial intelligence, a really big topic. It's a challenge, but I hope at least in a community like this of ambassadors, there's a sense that this challenge needs to be taken up. And maybe this connects with this comment that I really liked, education like marketing, because it sort of influences and changes people. And I even like to say that bring in this idea of digital transformation, which is a very popular idea, started first in business. Business liked to talk about digital transformation of a company. So how do you adjust processes to the digital world? I think that kind of sounds far away from education. But we've been doing work again at Centrum Cyfrowe, not just with educators, but also with cultural institutions. So the question became, okay, so you have a cultural institutions that really needs to function in a new way, use technology in a new way, use social media in a new way, behave a bit like marketing, because we all do. And at some point, we first understood that that's basically now called digital transformation. But secondly, the most important part of it is education. It's not bringing in new systems. It's not purchasing new equipment. It is often a needed part. But the really transformative part is getting the team of a given institution together, teaching them, explaining to them these new things, but also very importantly, showing them how to work together on adapting to the new situation. And if I'm sorry if I'm jumping a bit topics, but this adaptation together I think is very important, because I realize we also notice it in the pandemic. You know, at a time where educational systems were really strained, what worked extremely efficiently were groups of educators, for instance, teachers in a school, but also teachers on a Facebook group. In Greece, I think it was 40,000 teachers together, coming together and figuring out together what needs to be done, who needs to be helped, who understands things best, what guide needs to be written quickly. And I would say that's basically digital transformation, the way I like to see it.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think that's the idea of is sharing as the basis of digital transformation is quite powerful. I think it's so it's a good takeaway to take away with us. And also, you were talking about, these different spaces, just creating also both online and both in practice. So I think, what seems to me from also these all what we are talking about is that also non-formal, informal spaces are quite productive for change. So just wanted to have your opinion on that, and because of course also adult education deals a lot with non-formal and informal settings. So what do you think about that, and how, what's your thoughts? You have already talked about it a little bit, but maybe also you have examples or anything you want to share.
So my favorite setting of this kind, which I already mentioned, is Wikimedia. I really admire this project, which again, I think is a lot more than we typically think of. Typically we say, okay, it's an encyclopedia. By the way, most people probably don't even know it's open, that it can be edited. But even those who know basically think of it, okay, so it's interesting, they're writing it together. There are also some challenges related to disinformation, some bias. But I think Wikimedia is a very interesting also space and a very interesting service. We need to remember it's one of the biggest, most popular services in the world. And the list of most popular services basically includes commercial services. The ones with which we have so many debates today, are they being fair to us? Are they using our data properly? And among them, there is Wikimedia, which shows no advertisement, doesn't collect any data on the users, doesn't use any filtering mechanism. If Wikimedia was like Facebook, you would open it and it would tell you, I think today you want to be learning about Italian 19th century composers. Please go read this. It's not doing that, right? It's telling you, you should decide what you want to learn. I think we got very used to Wikimedia over 20 years, to Wikipedia, and we sometimes forget how still a revolutionary experience it is. In practical terms, I also hope, and I encourage everyone to look for ways to contribute to Wikimedia and to build around it. I think Wikimedia needs to grow and needs to be alive, and certain ways of doing things, the original ways, by these very dedicated encyclopedists, I think need to be adapted, or maybe new opportunities should be created. There always has been an idea that using Wikimedia can be an educational experience, which is a bit hard with, let's say, children and teenagers, but with adults, there are really amazing programs that encourage them to have this experience, not just to make Wikimedia better, but to have this experience of being a creator in a shared environment, producing something, being commented and receiving feedback. I think it's a great educational experience, and we should create more of them, of this kind.
Yeah, thanks, Alek. To mention Wikimedia, that also I'm really interested and I'm part of it. And also something about that, I think that it's not known to everyone. That it's also a community. It's not an encyclopedia, but it's a community. So everyone can contribute. So talking about contributions and participation, I think we have a question from our participants, from our audience. So I'd like to bring in Claudia again.
Yes, thank you. I'm back, and really good luck with the next question, because it really opens a huge topic. Federico, who is joining us in the streaming session, so commented on the platform, asks, do you think that changes should happen at an individual or institutional level? What can individuals do? So good luck, as I said.
I'm not sure I am answering the question, because indeed it's general, but I participated in some research on how change happens with regard to digital education, but it's probably broader. And it showed very strong role of individuals. Of course, then the question is how much the institution is supportive. It's this strange balance. But I think from also the perspective, as far as I understand this community of ambassadors, and this is also my personal story, I think we should believe people can do a lot. This is like some kind of leadership, right? That yes, we are facing all these complexities, and maybe because of that, sometimes it's easier for one person to understand these issues and present an explanation that is simple, convincing, and encouraging, before the whole system can figure it out through, report analysis, stakeholder dialogues, and so on. These are also important. But I think this is also my personal story. A lot of open education, for instance, the project to build open textbooks in Poland started 10 years ago in 2011. It started with around 4 people sitting down and saying this would be great. Finding allies in the government who didn't at that point understand open education, but who were in the institutional position and who trusted these visionaries. And then they could put these ideas into a program, and then the whole institutional goodness happens, because institution has this amazing power to scale things, right? If you convince an institution to do something, you suddenly
I think we lost Alek for a moment. You're freezed. We might have some connections issue. Okay, you're back. We lost you for a moment, Alek. But
dear passengers, we experienced some turbulences.
Yeah.
Please fasten your seatbelts. But the pilot still is holding the driving sticks. I'm back.
Okay, good. But I think, I don't know, I mean, you were blocked while you were talking. I think you were going towards the end.
I almost finished.
Okay. I just wanted to mention here, I'm just reading it because I was looking at the chat. We have a comment by one of our representative of the National Sports Service in Italy, Alessandra, who is saying that she added the term EPALE to Wikipedia Italy some years ago, and that it was really a learning experience. So she also puts the link here, so it will be interesting to have a look at it for the Italian speaking, and for the ones who are not Italian, they can translate it, of course, in other languages. So thank you. Thanks for sharing also, Alessandra, this experience. That's great. Also, I mean, we have just a couple of minutes. I just wanted to, since this conversation is so interesting, just wanted to have maybe just the last couple of sentences from you. Let's say in another panel you were part of. I think actually in the AA conference there was all a discussion on the importance of peer learning, which I think is really connected to also to what you were telling now on these shared spaces. And so, do you have anything to add to that, to how these shared learning can happen and how peer learning are connected?
I see a lot of it around me, basically, and I think it's a bit of an untold story. I know this is a community of adult educators, but I think the inspiration really comes from children, and I think there's a lot of research not done, because I want to be careful. I don't think we should be sorry, I hope my connection is okay. I see it so, but we should not be, romanticizing children using technology. It's not ideal, everything, but especially in the time of pandemic, where schools became a bit more distant, a bit sometimes maybe online, I would say kind of boring. I think at least some children, probably also adults, were looking for new ways of learning. The obvious place to look is the internet. When I want to be a bit radical, I basically say one of the biggest classrooms today is YouTube. Because honestly, we can discuss whether it's the right quality of education, but you can really learn almost everything there. I learned myself several things. Maybe this is not the most serious topic, but for instance, I learned to bake bread from the internet. And it's maybe not rocket engineering, but it really helps me in my life. But the really important part is when there's this peer element added, and I think it's happening. And again, this might sound like probably a controversial example, but I think Minecraft is a very interesting space. I just learned that Microsoft is supporting very big educational projects that have peer learning elements among students have a formal educational component they try to bring in schools, but they also understand that their game is also an educational space. And again, I don't know how controversial this is for you. I think it's at least fascinating, at least worth exploring. And I think this is something that might be for older generations harder, though again, this is not a black or white situations. I think we can all benefit from these peer models.
Okay, thank you. Because I think in that way we also added some other complexities and controversy, which I think is great. So complexity, I think, is the key word for this speech. And I really thank you, Alek. It was great to have to chat with you in this occasion. So so thanks again. Thanks also to our participants. I remind to the people who are following us on EPALE that tomorrow we will have another inspiring speech at 10:15 Central European Time, and so we see you there. And we're coming back to our ambassadors event. Okay, bye.